Welcome back to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlow. It's hard to believe, but the 2026 legislative session has already reached the halfway mark. This week, CBIA brought together top state officials, legislators, and business leaders for Connecticut Business Day. It really was a chance for lawmakers and employers to have meaningful conversations about key policy issues. We do want to start this episode with part of that conversation between Senate President Martin Looney, Senate Minority Leader Stephen Harding, House Speaker Matt Ritter, and House Minority Leader Vincent Candelora.
Yeah, so let's start to unpack the affordability issue that everybody's speaking about, right? I think the Senate President brought it up, healthcare, right? Let's talk a little bit more about that and what we can expect to see in terms of debate and what the next steps are.
Well, clearly healthcare is an issue both for the individual customer patient and also for businesses who want to provide benefits for their employees. I've always thought that it would be in the interest of small business to have support for a single payer health plan, because then small businesses would not be at a disadvantage to larger businesses in terms of not being able to offer a richer benefit array and would be able to compete better. And how many small businesses never get started because people are intimidated and not willing to leave the employment that they have right now because it contains benefits and to launch into the unknown. I think there's a much more significant role for public benefits, which would be an incentive for business creation. I think we also need to make sure that key benefits are continued to be mandated, because the problems could be magnified in a small group if all of a sudden a plan becomes not viable for a small business because all of a sudden there's one expensive case of an employee who requires a great deal of care, and the employer may lose coverage because of that, or be put into a pool and all of a sudden put into a higher paying bracket. So I think that remains a major challenge for us as a way to control healthcare costs for small businesses, to give them the encouragement they need to expand, to grow, to take on new staff, and to vigorously compete.
Want to win?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we have is the state of Connecticut really underfunds its Medicaid. And so the rates have created an accessibility crisis. We see our specialty doctors moving out of the state. We need to retain those doctors in order to retain access. So I think the way we start solving the issue of affordability is getting our rates higher, so we're actually reimbursing on the Medicaid side, because our population, more and more, it's over 1 million, I think 1.2 million of people using Medicaid in Connecticut. And the more use of Medicaid, private insurance ends up subsidizing, and that makes our private insurance more expensive. So rather than double down on more government programs, I think we've got to just support the one that we have right now.
I think one of the things I would warn about, and I try to be an optimistic person, but this keeps me up at night, I think it keeps everybody up at night, is if there are not changes made to H.R. 1, which was the bill that Congress passed this past year, Connecticut will lose about $1 billion plus in Medicaid payments from the federal government. Whether it's a Democratic or Republican president or Congress, it doesn't really, I don't think it's about that. Whatever is going on in Washington is not working for states. Alabama has hit just as hard as Connecticut. So whatever thoughts they had about making these massive reduction to the Medicaid formula, to Vinny's point, we underfund it as it is. Well, then we're not going to have any money to fully fund it, because we're going to be making up for all the people kicked off the rolls and or the money we lost from the federal government. That in 2028 is probably the largest looming fiscal crisis for not Connecticut, for all 50 states in the country.
So speaking of that, I think, one of the things that I think is a solution that we can implement now is associated healthcare plans. And I think that would be something that a lot of small business owners would be key to making them much more competitive with these larger organizations, or even government for that matter. I think associated healthcare plans is an easy solution that's not going to cost $1 billion plus. That's something like a public option may cost. So we could have a debate over whether or not we should have a public option, and that's a viable debate. But I think that if we're talking about addressing the affordability crisis that we're facing at this very moment, I think a simple solution to that today that would help small business owners, that would help employees across our state, would be allowing associated healthcare plans.
Speaking of costs, energy, you mentioned, is a top issue. I know recently with the war, there's been talks of gas prices, like a break in that sense, or electricity bills that I know we pay, small businesses pay. not paying sales tax on those fees. So I wanted to see if there's talks of a gas tax holiday or what you think on either of those items.
We're generally, we would like to see a gas tax holiday. I think that it would be a way to supplement some of the increases that we're seeing in gas right now. I think it is a viable option. I know the governor came out and said that he would support such an option. We would need legislative approval to do that, and I think generally the consensus in the legislature is generally positive towards the idea. I'll let the other leaders speak to that.
I think one of our challenges overall, not just in terms of the gas tax, is that, to what the speaker said earlier, is just the suddenness and volatility of change coming from Washington. At the end of February, when we were paying $2.80 something for gasoline, we didn't know that there was going to be a war with Iran starting, and would be paying $3.69 today. So things are being pulled away, and changes occur rapidly that we have to react to at the state level.
I don't mind voting for a gas tax holiday. We've done it before. Let me just offer another viewpoint. It's $40 million a month, okay, to provide it. Number two, prices are not looking stable. They may go up anyway and erase what you would have saved, but I guess you'd be still saving in some context. My only concern is we can't stop Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, truck drivers. They're getting the same tax break as Connecticut residents. Right. Number two, it is the richest person in the state is getting the same benefit as the poorest person. If we're going to look at tax relief, which I would rather look at a rebate from the $500 million fund that we've sort of talked about, directly to middle-class families. That could be for property tax stabilization. The governor talked about an energy rebate. At least that's more targeted.
Yeah, I would say the one thing, government has really benefited from inflation. Every time the prices go up, they collect more taxes. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to say, we don't need to keep benefiting off of the pain of inflation. When you talk about the electric rates, retail businesses are taxed, a sales tax on that electricity. I'm sympathetic to people in their homes, no question, have trouble paying their bills. For my business, our electric bill went up $75,000 last year. That was a cost that we didn't see coming that we had to absorb in our budget. That's catastrophic for any business. And so for us to be able to bring some predictability is important, but I think we've got to have the conversation. Every time these prices go up, does Connecticut need to collect more taxes and benefit from that increase in pricing?
So now let's talk about workforce. There's 68,000 open jobs in Connecticut, right? And those aren't all the same, right? High school students, some of those jobs would fit. What are we doing in terms of apprenticeships, pipeline programs?
Last year, on a bipartisan basis, we changed some laws based upon the apprenticeship programs to the trades. Mm-hmm. That makes it a little easier for employers to bring on apprentice employees. That's number one. There has been a really renewed effort to invest funding and focus on the trades. Finding that money in a budget it's about prioritizing, but it should be a priority of ours to look into and investing in apprentice and trades, because it's going to be important. And I continue to hear from employers in those fields how difficult it is to find and then retain those employees in those fields. And if we don't have them, someone's going to have to fix the electric in my house, because I ain't going to do it.
I think we also have to look at the benefits cliff in Connecticut. Now that we have minimum wage tied to inflation, one of the impacts that I think we need to look at is how many people are now faced with the decision of, do I work a full-time job and lose my health benefits, or do I stay home and maintain my health benefits? And if you have a family of 4, that might be the option for you, is to stay home. And so is that having an impact on our workforce? I anecdotally think it does, and I think it's something Connecticut should take a look at. Is there a way to adjust our benefits cliff to encourage people that are avoiding work because they don't want to lose their health care?
Quickly, just two things too. One is housing's an issue. I'm not trying to revisit what was a controversial bill last year, but if you ask Electric Boat, their biggest problem is finding places for their employees to live and by where they would work. The second thing you can look at is childcare affordability. We've tackled that by creating a childcare trust fund in Connecticut. The hope is in 5 years, through interest, we'll be able to subsidize childcare for families. That will help get people back to work as well.
As the speaker said, the goal of that in a few years, as we fund that endowment, is that families with earnings under $100,000 a year will be able to get free childcare in the state. And for those earning over $100,000, will have to pay no more than 7% of the family income for that. Because right now we know people are being crushed by the cost of childcare, and in many cases, one member of a couple will give up working altogether just because it's not really feasible to work given the cost of childcare. So that's something that has been has had a depressing effect on our economy for years, as well as the fact that we know it also leads in some cases to gaps in quality of care. And then that's a price we pay when the children go to kindergarten and are not ready for kindergarten if they haven't had a quality preschool program.
Attending events like Business Day keeps employers informed. Another place employers turn to stay abreast of what's happening in Connecticut is by reading the Hartford Business Journal. HBJ has spent years covering businesses and issues that define Connecticut's economy. We sat down with HBJ's editor, Greg Bordonaro, for insights into what he's hearing from business leaders. All right, Greg. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. We're excited to have you and talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the business community. So let's dive right in. Tell me a little bit about what are kind of the most consistent things that you guys are hearing?
Yeah, coming into this year, I think there's a little bit more uncertainty from the business community. We do our economic forecast every year. Coming into 2025, I think there was a lot of optimism from the business community. I thought, from a federal perspective, I thought there was going to be, an incoming administration that might have more tax-friendly policies, maybe less in regulations, things like that. The economy was actually doing well coming out of 2024. Thoughts about interest rates lowering, and then 2025, I think, brought some good and bad. There was a lot of uncertainty still hanging around with tariff policy changing constantly. At the same time, Big Beautiful Bill offered a lot of incentives and good things for companies in terms of tax cuts. But what we saw coming into 2026 was more uncertainty. In our survey, 29.4% of our readers basically said that they thought the economy would improve in 2026. That was down from 51.2%. Year earlier,
which is quite significant.
Yeah,
number.
that was a noticeable drop off. A higher percentage of our readers thought that there was a higher chance for a recession coming into this year. So I just think it's the sort of economic uncertainty hanging around there. While overall the economy the economy performed well for the most part of last year. Connecticut saw third quarter GDP growth of I think it was like 5.6%, fourth highest in the country. I've been around for a while. I've never seen Connecticut ranked that high. Even the second quarter GDP growth was 4.6%. And then we started to see a slowdown with the U.S. GDP only growing 1.4% in the fourth quarter. So going into this year and now with oil prices spiking again, there's just still a lot of uncertainty while the economy overall has been holding up pretty well.
When you talk to business leaders, is it more the uncertainty at the federal level that you think is driving this response, or do you think it's some of the uncertainty here in Connecticut as well?
There's always uncertainty in Connecticut, especially when the legislature's in session. Overall, the sentiment, when I got here in 2008 with the financial crisis and budget deficits and tax increases, those were some difficult times. There is budget stability now for the most part in Connecticut, which I think is, given the business community, sort of a breath of fresh air. But whenever the legislators in session, there's always sort of uncertainty there, and you see all these different labor mandates that get brought up. That give. I know CBA is always involved in those debates. On the state level, it's healthcare costs, it's energy costs, which. Not just a state issue, but Connecticut's energy prices are among the highest in the country. So those are big issues in Connecticut as well. And our energy has been such a big topic, and there's no silver bullet in terms of solving that issue. And it being a shorter session this year, I don't see any major policy changes that are going to sort of bend that cost curve.
Yeah, I mean, Lamont had a kind of really announced in his State of the State about that kind of rebate for families. What else are you hearing in terms of energy discussions? Like, did you think that there would be more solutions presented this year? I
thought we'd see more of the public benefits charge debate. It's probably coming, and it's there in the background. I know that Republicans want to get rid of the public benefits charge. Democrats are kind of resistant to that because they say, okay, we get rid of the public benefits charge, but that sort of all moves into the budget and basically would probably lead to maybe tax increases. So I think that's kind of in a short session. I think that's going to be the big energy debate. There is some talk about data centers and putting tighter restrictions on data centers in Connecticut, even though we really haven't gotten any yet.
But it's also a big national, topic.
Yeah, and it seems like all states are moving towards, requiring data centers to have their own sort of electricity supply, so that they're not taxing the grid and forcing everybody else to pay for those. I don't see Connecticut being a big home base for a lot of data centers anyways, maybe some smaller ones. So there's that debate, but no big solutions on the, how to lower the cost of energy. Probably, natural gas, expanding natural gas supply is probably a big part of the solution. I'm not sure Connecticut's going to go down that road. So it's a challenging one, but I do think you'll see more of the public benefits charge debate.
In terms of healthcare policy, you've seen a lot in your time.
Yep.
You've seen, some different changes in the market. What do you expect right now that you think you're hearing from the legislative side and from the business community?
Yeah, so if you're in a fully insured small group plan, your life is not fun. You're seeing actually our reader survey. I think we had 42% of our readers expected price increases between 11 and 20%, for a small business, and our audience is small to mid-sized businesses. That's a huge increase. I don't see any. So we're waiting to see what this Connecticut option is from Governor Lamont. Is it a public option? Is it not? He's saying it's not a public option per se, but it's going to be some sort of state
details
plan.
Have been pretty scarce right now.
Details, and actually, I don't think we're going to get one this year. We might even get the details next year because there's a bill right now that would basically have the Office of Policy Management study the issue for a year or two. So that's not a short-term solution. Obviously, the association health plans, which CBIA has been big on. I haven't actually seen a ton of talk about it. There is a bill in the legislature to make that happen. To me, that would be a no-brainer, low-cost option for the state to allow that. And then I think there is a tax credit too for small businesses that buy from or that participate with the exchange program. Mm-hmm. So that's a possibility too. But again, there's no silver bullets when it comes to healthcare costs either.
What are some of, these are definitely some of the more challenging topics for business leaders and lawmakers alike. Based on kind of your survey, where do you see some of the optimism for businesses?
They do like the budget stability, that Connecticut has enjoyed basically, since 2017 with the fiscal guardrails. So I think the business community is happy with where the budget situation is because, that provides more certainty on the cost and the tax front. There has been some investment in workforce development, even though the workforce shortage is still a problem. And I think there has been small pockets of efforts to reduce the regulatory environment. At the same time, there's been all these new employer mandates that get brought up in the labor committee. So that's kind of a give and take.
Counterbalances a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, and Deep's done some strong things over the years.
Yeah, that's probably been the Transfer Act going away. That's probably been the biggest regulatory change. Probably Connecticut's seen in a long time. And so there's optimism that will help, get more industrial properties sold and maybe redeveloped into new uses.
I think it's interesting, kind of some of the processes that you take. There's a lot of bills to cover, right? You're the Hartford Business Journal. Yep. So obviously, the interests of business, being a lot of your audience. How does your team kind of stay abreast to what's happening?
Yeah, one of the things so we have a report at the Capitol, and I tell them, wherever the crowd's going in terms of the reporters, go into a press conference, say, don't go there, don't spend your time there. Go look at other things that because a lot of the business issues don't get covered. So that's why we stepped in. I know CBA does itself, but just from the traditional media, they're not covering a lot of the important business issues. They'll cover the big ones, the striking workers bills and things like that. But there are so many bills that get put in the legislature that impact business. It's actually really incredible when you think about it. Some are pro business, others are would be viewed as negative for business. So we saw an opportunity there to cover those bills that aren't always getting covered. And there's a lot of things that come up in the legislature. So that's where we kind of go. Obviously the labor committee is a big one. We even look at things like the banking committee, what's happening in the banking industry. Commerce committee is another big one. So our sole focus is on business related bills, and we're not going to every press conference that legislators are having, because, a lot of those press conferences don't really impact businesses. So that's where we find our sort of sweet spot.
Yeah, try and really dive into those. What are those side conversations being had that sometimes maybe even, sneak in?
Yeah, yep.
What are some of the other, top things that you're kind of going to be watching as the next several weeks pan out? There's attempts to, increase taxes on high earners. That's something that's of interest to our audience. I just wrote a column basically saying, don't go down that road, especially when a lot of other blue states are raising top level taxes right now. It's a chance maybe for Connecticut to stand out and gain a bigger competitive advantage. And then it's kind of those labor bills, which ones might get pushed through. Obviously the warehouse quota bill get included in the emergency bill. That was kind of a surprise. So, are any of these other labor bills, like the striking workers bill, are they going to sneak through finally? Because, these things get brought up year after year, it seems, and they're not going to go away, until, maybe they get through at some point. Right. Well, HBJ has been around for quite some time. Obviously, you've been really connected since 2008. You're a UConn grad from Connecticut. What are you where do you think the HBJ stands in terms of the business ecosystem, and what are your hopes for its future?
Yeah, just as a news media in general in Connecticut has sort of contracted over the years, we've actually grown. I have the biggest staff that I've ever had. We're statewide now. We have a reporter in Stamford covering Fairfield County. We have a Fairfield newsletter. So we cover all parts of the state. So I think our influence has actually grown as others have shrunk. We're a niche. We just cover business, and we're B2B. Our audience is business people. If you're in the sort of the daily general interest journalism world, that's not the best place to be in. So I think our influence was really grown. We just started covering the legislature really a few years ago in terms of having a dedicated reporter there. So I think our impact is growing, and we see it in page views and things like that. So it's I think HBJ is in a good spot. Again, having a B2B marketplace, B2B audience is helpful in terms of news media.
Great. Well, Greg, thank you. We're looking forward to continuing to see the coverage, as we know many of our business leaders wake up, go through CBIA's headlines, and there's at least 3 or 4 from your paper.
All right. Thank you.
We're going to close out this episode with some of the top stories you may have missed. A bill to help small businesses provide high-quality, affordable health insurance for their employees took a big step forward in the legislature this week. By a 9-4 vote, the Insurance and Real Estate Committee approved legislation allowing small businesses to pool their risk and purchase health insurance through a trade association or local chamber of commerce. More than 50 small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and chambers of commerce testified in support of the bill, saying it'll help them address a healthcare crisis. Legislation to expand access to R&D tax credits is also progressing. Now, both the governor's budget adjustment proposal and a standalone bill will allow thousands of small and mid-sized businesses access to the credit, helping them invest in innovation and their workforce. After more than 40 years, the state has officially replaced the antiquated Transfer Act as the primary driver for property site cleanups. As of March 1st, the release-based cleanup regulations are now in effect. The regulations are designed to address contaminated properties and support economic development. And the legislature's Higher Education Committee is considering several proposals to align the state's education system with workforce needs. The bills address key areas, including expanding paid internships, work-based learning, and early college opportunities. The goal of the legislation is to make career pathways more accessible while helping employers build stronger talent pipelines. That's a wrap on this week's BizCast. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, give us your feedback and share any guests you'd like to hear from by emailing us at bizcast@cbia.com. And remember, you can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For a full list of episodes, head on over to cbia.com.